So I'm Rosie Ferraro, and I'm presenting on behalf of my co-authors Ryan Hamilton, Kelly Hawes, and Anirban Mukhopadhyay. So Ryan's in the session, but I'll be presenting, but he'll be available to help with the Q&A. So the title of our paper is Traveling with Companions, the Social Customer Journey, and I want to thank MSI and the Journal of Marketing for putting the issue and the session together. So customer journey frameworks have arisen as a useful tool for modeling consumer decision-making. Consumer journeys, essentially they break consumer decisions down into a series of steps that constitute the path to purchase and beyond. These journeys and the related funnel models were recognized as far back as the late 1800s. So our paper introduces the social customer journey, which adapts the customer journey framework to reflect that when consumers take a journey, they rarely do so alone. So we start with the position that consumer decisions don't occur in isolation, but rather within an interactive context of social relationships and societal concerns, and that's facilitated by technology. So today's marketing environment has evolved to one in which the digital technology has expanded the context in which consumers learn from each other's consumption experiences, changed how consumers socialize and connect to others, and allows artificial intelligence agents, say Alexa and Siri, to play relationship roles in consumers' daily lives. So it's inevitable that consumer decision-making has evolved along with these technological and social changes. So this is Table 1 from our paper, and it contains a cross-section of customer journey frameworks that have been proposed by experts in academia and marketing practice. And over time, the depictions of the customer journey have changed. They've become more complex and more specialized. There's additional stages that have been added before and after the purchase stage, and you have recent contributions that focus on the nonlinearity of the journey, and also journey frameworks that have focused on emphasizing the stakeholders who own different touch points along the journey. So what we did is we started with a 6-step journey that built on the greatest points of similarity from these previous models. So we have motivation, information search, evaluation, decision, satisfaction, and post-decision sharing. And as reflected in the title of this slide, so we argued that one common feature of these previous customer frameworks is that they're individual customer journeys. They're focused on an isolated consumer as the decision-making unit. So this is reflected in that lone figure, right? He or she is walking and traveling that customer journey. When these previous frameworks have accommodated social influences, they've done so in fairly general ways. They either emphasize that there are these social factors that play a role at the various stages, but without articulating those specific factors, or they viewed them more as sort of broader environmental conditions, such as at the retail environment, along with things like the store design and ambiance. So the lack of focus on these social influences is surprising, just given that there's this huge literature in the consumer and the academic consumer environment that documents the many ways in which the social context actually influences consumer decisions. So one point I'll make about this figure is you see these circular loops. So they are there because we want to reflect that. We acknowledge that there's nonlinearity in the customer journey. Obviously, consumers iterate between steps. They drop out, come back later. We have repeat purchases. So recognizing that there is nonlinearity, but we went with a linear model really to have a more parsimonious and generalizable foundation to layer on what we wanted to with the social elements. And so that's why we just represent that nonlinearity with the circular loops in the figure. So this is our social customer journey adapted from that traditional customer journey framework. And so what we do is we introduce the notion of traveling companions. So these are the social others on the journey who interact with either directly or indirectly with the decision maker through one or more stages of the journey. These traveling companions can be individuals or they can be in aggregated form, and they can influence the focal customer's decision journey at one or more of the stages. So if we think about, say, the opinions of anonymous others aggregated ratings of groups that are readily available when consumers are searching for product information. Consumers readily ask their Facebook friends, whom they may never have met in person, for input on which restaurant to dine at when they're on vacation, or they seek out recommendations from mommy bloggers about which diaper bag to buy. So these traveling companions are depicted below that solid journey line. We kind of had some fun with these images down there. You'll see a little robot in there as well. And you'll see that we have these bi-directional arrows there, which really emphasize that social influences flow in both directions. As the focal traveling companion there also the focal customer also influences the traveling companions at the bottom. For example, after a purchase, a consumer will frequently share information about product performance, which potentially influences the decision-making of the others with their ratings and reviews. So the examples I just laid out are quite varied, but they also reflect that social others can play many roles in the social customer journey. So a traveling companion can be a close friend who, in a face-to-face interaction, is raving about the restaurant that they've just been to, or it can be a group of anonymous customers that are posting their reviews about that same restaurant on a platform like Yelp. So to help characterize these various roles, we conceptualized a continuum of social others based on how close they are to the focal consumer. So social distance, as we conceptualize it, can be affected by many aspects of social relationship dimensions, but we highlighted 5 that are especially relevant to marketing. So the number of social others, the extent to which that other is known, the presence, either physically or in time, group membership, and strength of ties. So what we do is we suggest that that these dimensions together, it's more like a global sense of social distance. So those proximal social others tend to be specific, individuated others. They're going to be the members of the focal customers in groups and have strong ties, such as a close friend. Whereas the distal social others, they're going to be potentially larger groups or even the entirety of society, whose members aren't necessarily individuated, present, or even known to the consumer. If there is a distal social other who is a single individual, it's probably going to be someone that the consumer doesn't know. So, for example, a YouTube tutorialist. And so while we acknowledge that the proximal social others are generally going to have a stronger influence on consumer decision-making, we argue for instances when those distal social others may be more impactful. Additionally, perceived social distance is malleable, and even if we consider artificial intelligence agents, as they become more familiar, they're going to be in our homes, in our cars, and on our persons, they may come to be perceived as proximal social others as well. Another take that we have on the social customer journey is what we refer to as the joint journey here. So even with all of the technological changes out there, societal forces that have changed, it's still the case that the closest social distance relationships are those that may be in our household, right? And there's decisions that are made jointly. So the individuals are so close that they become members of a decision-making unit together. These are fundamentally, we argue that these are fundamentally different social journeys in that they're characterized by interdependence amongst, in most or all of the stages. So we have the 2 figures that are walking the journey together, and they're also influenced by these traveling companions below the solid line there. So decision-making in such situations is qualitatively different because the members of those decision-making units have interdependent utilities, and they must manage relationship dynamics. We spend time in the paper talking about this special case. I'm not going to talk about it further here just because of time. So with all that in mind, the goal of our paper wasn't to create a more accurate journey map. We weren't trying to account for a wider set of consumer decisions, nor were we trying to review all of the academic literature on social influences. Instead, what we tried to do is just isolate and highlight previous research, a couple topics that are relevant to each of the various stages. But our focus was trying to offer ideas for how viewing the customer journey through this social lens can generate new research ideas. And also we wanted to highlight implications for marketing practice. And so what I'm going to do briefly is just review, for each of the stages, review some of the research insights that we discussed in the paper and some of the marketing implications as well. All right, so motivation kicks off the customer journey. So consumers are frequently motivated by interactions with and observation of social others, such as feeling, the pressure to keep up with the Joneses, or you're seeing a friend's gushing review about a new product on Facebook, or you're reading a celebrity's social media post about some new exercise regimen that they're engaging in. And so one area of prior research has shown that consumers are motivated to affiliate with others, and one way they do so is that by matching the consumption behavior of others. Yet consumers also make purchases as a mechanism to differentiate from others, particularly in product categories that convey identity. So meeting these needs requires that brands not only recognize the functional aspects, symbolic aspects of the products that consumers are searching for, but also about the groups and the customers that consumers wish to affiliate with or distinguish themselves from, and the dimensions on which they want to do so. Now, we also know that consumption is may be driven by altruistic or pro-social motivations for the greater good. For example, consumers may be motivated to engage in environmentally responsible consumption. In such cases, motivational influences can come from observing a specific individual or by abstractly defined groups in the broader society. And so even more so than when we wrote the paper, there's a strong pressure for brands to engage on social and environmental issues. And whether they like it or not, brands may be forced into taking positions on such issues by groups of customers or activists. Okay, so information search involves accessing memory and external environment for relevant product information. So new technologies have made information search less costly and allowed consumers to access a wealth of information from social sources. And while information search may still entail talking to your proximal others, your family, your friends, your co-workers, neighbors, increasingly consumers first are turning to and may actually be more persuaded by the aggregated ratings that they see, the detailed product reviews, the crowdsourcing, social media influencers, online interest groups. So importantly, positive word-of-mouth communications may not affect consumer behavior if the information doesn't come in the form that's most compatible with how consumers make their decisions. Is obviously something for brands to keep in mind. But one drawback of easy access to information from social others is information overload. This raises important questions about how consumers sift and integrate information. The ease of access to multiple sources, ironically, may actually serve as an impediment to information gathering, as there's a proliferation of experts out there. And so that seems like maybe information search is never fully complete, and then the label of expert may lose its meaning when there's so many experts that are out there. So brands need to find ways to help consumers effectively search and utilize the various information sources. So in the evaluation stage, this involves consumer comparing the options available based on the information they've acquired. And how information is interpreted depends on who the information comes from. So given the emergence of new social sources of information, if we think about social media influencers, for example, it's important to reconsider those classic notions of what makes a source persuasive. So credibility, trustworthiness, attractiveness. Consumers are still going to evaluate sources on those dimensions, but the cues that they use to make those evaluations will be different. So thinking about like an online source, so things like the number of likes or followers or reviews that are posted may be an indicator. And as consumers regularly interact with bloggers and other social media influencers, the relationships become more familiar and potentially more proximal, which could influence trust or likability of these sources. So brands must obviously need to consider how consumers are determining credibility, trustworthiness, et cetera, from these social sources. So we also see opportunities for research related to the role of AI-based recommendation agents. So AI agents can complement other social influences, such as facilitating access to or navigating through customer reviews, but they might also serve as substitutes for traditional social influences. So brands must understand under what conditions customers will accept recommendations from AI agents. There's a potential that the more the consumer sees an AI agent as a traveling companion, the more likely the consumer is to rely exclusively on its evaluations. So the decision then is the culmination of the pre-decision stages, suggesting that the decision reflects all of the traveling companions encountered thus far, but traveling companions can also influence the consumer at the point of purchase. And I realize I'm coming close to the end of my time, so I'm probably going to just go a little bit more quickly than I intended to here. So what we talk about in this stage is the physical presence of social others at the point of decision making. This can affect the consumer because of impression management or social pressure, but they also might enhance the shopping experience there. So we talk a little bit about robots coming into the retail environment, the service environment, and serving as a traveling companion at the point of purchase. So certainly brands will have to consider how robots and other self-service technologies will affect consumers in the retail environment. There's also the felt presence of social others at the point of decision making, so that can affect the outcome. So when brands are utilizing messages like, oh, 30 other people are booking this hotel room right now, or 5 other people are considering this offer, that enhances this sense of scarcity or pressure of these felt other individuals. And using information such as the electricity usage of your neighbors can impact the decision-making of the customer. In the satisfaction stage, we talk about consumption being affected both by virtual usage, shared consumption experiences. So when people share consumption experiences, that can enhance that experience. And as we see even in the pandemic, this new technology allows for virtual sharing in new domains, exercise classes, online gaming, et cetera. So thinking about creative ways that brands can enhance satisfaction by enhancing simultaneous usage with others, and also helping to learning experiences that might be created from those social others. So we know how-to videos on YouTube are particularly impactful and are viewed heavily by consumers. So we may get more out of learning from these online videos than, say, from a friend about various products. So enhancing and connecting consumers for learning opportunities. And I'm definitely at the end of my time here. So just I'll say at the post-decision sharing, obviously post-decision sharing is a heavily social activity, and there's various motivations that consumers share. And that depends also on the nature of the audience, platform, and type of device. And I will just leave my slide here for summary and conclusions there, and I'll stop since I'm at time.